A badge of honor. Police officers and first responders wear badges to let their communities know they are here to protect and serve. But that's not how it feels today, and the stress of the job is taking its toll, taking lives through suicide and post-traumatic stress injury. A Badge of Honor podcast features the cast of the same name, Sam Horwitz and John Salerno. Sam, John, and the team offer the first responders workshops through their critical incident stress management teams and mental health liaisons to offer state-certified T-COLE credit programs that save lives. It's time to smash through the stigma. It's time to heal from your injury, and it's time to back our blue. Welcome to A Badge of Honor podcast. Here are your hosts, Sam Horwitz and John Salerno.
Hey, welcome to A Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam. We are powered by the OBBM network, man. And now you can see us on the OBBM network TV channel. Is it .tv, Sam?
Yeah, .tv.
OBBMnetwork.tv. Stream it on your TV. Sit back in your most favorite recliner, and you can just sit back and relax and enjoy this show and get on this Mental Health Monday, man, because that's what it's all about.
Or any however you watch on a pad or your phone. So that is the network, how you can stream however you watch TV. I think they also said you can, when you turn on your TV, let's say we have Fire TV, and you can just search OBBM network and get it right there. We're on Roku, and next season, John and I, we have just absolutely had an incredible season, an incredible year. We've never done seasons before. You and I have just kept going, and it's like, hey, you know what? We need a little bit more organization to it, and to all of our guests, because this is episode 104. It's just been a blast, and we thank you so much for your wisdom and knowledge and pouring into all the first responders and everybody who watches and listens every single week. So we're going to be wrapping up the season next week. And don't worry, we're not going anywhere. You'll be able to watch, through the end of the year. But come January, we'll have a little bit of a new look to things. And you guys asked to see our faces and our guest faces, and we delivered. So thank you so much for that. And John, this weekend you did an awesome comedy show for a charity. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was actually for two charities. Excuse me. It was for Unchained Foundation and Operation 360, both wonderful charities that Unchained Foundation, when someone's battling an illness, be it terminal or long-term sickness, housekeeping, getting your nails done, hair appointments, just the basic life needs do get in the way, and they take care of all that. And this way they allow you to focus on your healing. So they'll take it they'll do the nail appointments. They'll take you to the hair appointments. They'll clean your house. They'll wash your dishes. They'll cook your dinners. They'll make everything nice for you so you can just focus on getting healed. And Operation 360 is a bunch of retired military and law enforcement that are battling the fentanyl epidemic that is plaguing our country, in deaths in numerous amounts. I mean,
six figures.
Yeah, I don't even think we had that many deaths in the 90s through the crack epidemic. And here we're just losing children and kids and people by the hundreds of thousands by this fentanyl crisis. So Operation 360 has taken a grassroots front line, and they are operational and out of the boundaries of a lot of law enforcement, because they are a private entity. So they can really get the information a little bit more without warrants and everything else. So they're fighting it on the home front. So it was a great charity event. Comedy show, had some great comics. Everybody laughed. Everybody healed. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole fentanyl thing and recovery, it's an interesting thing with that drug, and our guest tonight is in substance abuse and recovery. And that's part of what he does, but he used to be, a federal agent. He's a veteran, and he has done a lot. And the biggest thing that stands out when we first talked to Paul was how he made the transition from law enforcement, because he was in for so long. So veteran to law enforcement to not wearing a uniform anymore. And he's doing incredible stuff because there's so many challenges, whether it's veteran or first responder related, when we switch uniforms or when we finally decide to say, hey, it's time to move on to our next great life adventure. And we want to do it successfully. So without further ado, let's bring on Paul Collette to a Badge of Honor podcast. Paul, welcome.
You're welcome, Paul.
Hi, Sam. Hi, John. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. You bet. I feel like you have worn so many hats throughout your life and done so much. Just tell everybody watching and listening on their favorite podcast app about you. I want to say how you ended up where you are now. So
sure. Wow. We only have 55 minutes, but here I go. Okay. I was a military brat. Grew up in the military. My dad was in the Air Force. He was a navigator, retired as a lieutenant colonel. He's my hero. He served 2 tours in Vietnam, went to Grenada, Panama. He flew the AC-130 gunship, so he's had a lot of experience combat-wise in the Air Force. Did 20 years, retired. Then went to work again for the government for another agency for another 20 years, retired from them. And he's still here, still kicking. He's living in Arkansas, enjoying his life, well-deserved. Yeah. But growing up in the military, we moved around a lot. As a military brat, you're moving every 3 to 4 years. So it was culturally, that is how I was indoctrinated. Public service. I always knew I was going to join the military at some point in my life. At the very least, I knew that it was going to be some type of public service. So as I got closer to graduating from high school, kind of at a crossroads what I was going to do with my life. So I went to college. I'm 57, so this was in the mid 80s, and went to Northern Arizona University, which was a party school in Flagstaff, Arizona, and changed my major so many times. I actually had to pick something my senior year. Turned out it was a major in art history. Just enjoyed taking art history and had a blast doing it. So I thought I was going to actually work in art galleries. Moved to New York City, 1989, 90, right in the middle of one of the worst recessions ever. And got a job working there, working at a hospital called Bellevue, which is a psychiatric hospital, Lower East Side.
And trauma hospital.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. John's nodding his head. Yeah. And working in the psychiatric ER as a clinical case manager, which is really a fancy word of saying I was just a caseworker. And I was working with homeless or unhoused, now mentally ill, chemically addicted individuals that the NYPD would bring in, and they're called them EDPs, emotionally disturbed people, into the ER. And as a budding social worker, because I thought I was actually going to be a social worker at that point, was exposed to a lot of really intelligent, smart individuals in the mental health space, including law enforcement, getting to know the NYPD, getting to know a Secret Service. They bring in U.S. Marshals, they bring in everybody, that they needed for a psych eval into the ER. And kind of discovered myself realizing that in my early 20s, I didn't yet have the temperament to be a social worker. I was young. I was still figuring out my own way in life, developing my own brain, and who was I going to be, and realized that I wanted to go into law enforcement. So at the time, I took every civil service test in New York, and in New York City, it's all civil service tests. So if you want to get a job, you got to take the civil service exam. So the NYPD had an exam that they offered, and this was a time when those exams, I think, opened up once every 3 or 4 years, right, John? I think it was
about that. Yeah,
about that.
What year was it you took it?
It was like 90.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I took it just probably about the year before.
Okay. And it was, you had to wait like 3 years. That list would be exhausted, and then they would offer the exam again.
Yep.
And at the time, it was like 30, 40, 50,000 applicants for, those NYPD jobs. And they were great jobs to have at the time. And took the exam, waiting to be called, went through all the steps. And just when I was about to get called to the academy, my list died. So I had to take the exam all over again. And I was just like, I can't wait another 3-4 years for this exam to open up again. So went into probation. New York City probation was hiring at the time. I took their exam, met the qualifications. So
God bless you, man. God bless you. That, you know, you talk about hard jobs. Probation is probably one of the hardest jobs in the city.
Oh, brother. And not only one of the hardest jobs at the time, was one of the most underappreciated jobs.
Yes. Yeah.
And it paid less than the NYPD. And you had to have a college degree to get that job. NYPD, it was at the time just a high school diploma.
High school diploma, right?
That was it. And age 21. For this job, it was college, and they wanted some experience, actually. So be that as it may, I got hired, went to work for them for about 3.5 years. They put me in family court for the first part of my career. But the last half of my career, actually, I went into what they called field services, the field services unit. And that was the armed division of probation, where we actually went out and served warrants. And I was actually attached, embedded in the 7/8 precinct, the 78th precinct in Brooklyn. And
I was 77, right next door.
Yeah, I was working with their anti-crime, street crime, whatever they called it at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Learned so much about getting guns off the street. Sat at the feet of some of the best detectives I've ever had the pleasure of working with. And had taken the test again. By that point, the test had opened up, fully expecting to go to NYPD, when I heard about this other job called United States probation, federal probation. I'm like, oh, what the hell is that? Well, it turns out that out of the 3 branches of government, the executive, judicial, and
legislative.
The legislative, thank you. Let's just start it. The judicial branch actually has a law enforcement division, and it's the United States Probation Office. So there's actually 2 branches, 2 law enforcement divisions within the judicial branch. It's the U.S. Supreme Court Police, and then the United States Probation Office. And there's about, at the time when I was hired in 97, there was only about, I think, 1,100 federal probation officers at the time. It's grown since then a bit. But basically, United States probation officers supervise federal offenders. So those are individuals that have been arrested for federal offenses. And we serve 3 functions. It's at the pretrial stage. It's when they get arrested. If they're put out on federal bond, pretrial officers, U.S. probation officers, supervise them in the community while their case is pending.
The other half is watchful eye of them, right? You got to keep an eye on them.
Yeah, there's a lot of conditions. Like if there's a sex offender, for like somebody's been arrested for trafficking, drug trafficking, or a sex offender, judges throw out a lot of conditions. Like you can't frequent places where there are children, and internet, well, there really wasn't an internet back then, but computer monitoring conditions, third party risk. If you are a drug offender and you're out on federal bond, you can't hang out with convicted felons or anybody that you arrested with in your indictment. And, you can't go to these specific areas, all these drug and alcohol treatment, all these wonderful conditions that the court imposes while they're waiting for them to be sentenced. And 99% of those cases end up either pleading out or getting convicted, because the United States Attorney's Office, they ain't taking cases that are not winnable. So, when it's your name versus the United States of America, they got you. You're going to plead out, and most of those cases are pled out. So U.S. probation officers also write what they call pre-sentence investigations, and those are basically enhanced background investigations on the offender, and that helps the judge arrive at a more informative decision about what the sentence may be. Because when the person's arrested, they go in front of the judge. The judge just knows about the offense, not about the person that's in front of them. Right. So that will help the judge. Like, do they have a drug problem? Do they have financial issues? Anything going on with their family? Is there support in the community? Things that might mitigate or increase the sentence depending upon who that person is in front of them. And then once they're sentenced, they go to federal prison. We're out there at the gate waiting for them when they come out, because the dirty little secret of being sentenced in federal court is there's no more federal parole. They call it supervised release. So when somebody is sentenced in federal court, say it's bank robbery, you do 20 years, you'll serve 2/3 of your sentence with good time if you're lucky. But the judge tacks on what they call supervised release. That's an additional period on your federal sentence. So it's 20 years plus 3 years of supervised release. So we're out there in the community helping them transition back successfully, ideally. So they'll go to a federal halfway house. We'll set them up with housing, services. We'll monitor them, make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, drug test them. And if they're not complying with the conditions, we bring them back to court, and the judge violates them if necessary. So 3 different.
This is fascinating. If you guys are just tuning in, we're talking with Paul Collette. He's taking us through very, you nailed it. Very little known about the U.S. U.S. probation system. We got to take a break. We will be right back to continue the story. Stay tuned, everybody.
All right.
There's a quote that has inspired me to start my business, to do something different, to be a radical, I guess, in the wireless industry. We started with trying to help customers with their cell phones first, find ways to reduce costs, try to make it easy for customers to get customer service, to solve customers' problems. And with that, all we ask is that they would just order through us to do an upgrade or new activation just as they would in a retail store. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you want to go with a guy that's actually going to help you save money instead of going to a place that all you are to them is a ticket to their next commission? We're here to help. Dave with Outerbridge Industries, we are your bridge over troubled wireless.
Hey, welcome back to a Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam with our special guest, Paul Collette. Paul, before we took that break, we're talking about a little bit about your past. And, I was NYPD, and we had as tough as that job was, you were probation in New York City. You worked in Bellevue. I worked for New York City EMS, and I know that trauma center was busy. And then, what is the caseload of a probation officer? I can't even imagine what you guys had to do on a daily basis.
Oh, so city probation at that time, when I had a caseload, and then I transitioned to warrants, and so we had a couple warrants we had to try to clear every week. But I'd say a typical caseload between 50 to 80 people.
That's a lot.
For one officer.
For one officer. Yeah.
How do you? No wonder so many people slip through the cracks.
You would triage. You would try to focus on the high risk offenders, right? And then ideally the low risk ones. You pray that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Right. They'd have mail in at the time. There was no computers, so they couldn't check in via the internet. So they had to mail in their monthly reporting forms or report in person to the office. So, we had office days, office hours, we'd be there. And then some other days we'd be out in the field, driving around, doing unannounced home visits, non-traditional hours, day, nights, weekends. And, it took a toll on you. I like the overtime, when it was available, which, you guys, NYPD always took our overtime. We had zero. And that's why when I looked at the landscape of my career, this is unsustainable to me. I can't do this for 20, 25, 30 years, right. and only make $50,000, $60,000 a year, and at the time I was married to my first wife, and we had 2 children. We lived in Staten Island, and back then it was relatively inexpensive. Staten Island is where all the cops and firefighters lived, and all the civil servants lived. But it was still, I had to hustle. I had to work my ass off, my butt off. Sorry, and I realized that becoming a Fed at that time offered me more pay. At the time, I thought prestige. We could transfer eventually, which we did. 2001 at that time. So I got hired by the feds. I did that for not 97 to 2001, and then 2001, a position opened up for transfer opportunity in Texas. So uprooted my family. We moved down to Corpus Christi, Texas for a year, and then transferred to Houston, Texas for 4 years. And at that point, then I was doing pre-sentence investigations. I was doing what they call WITSEC, which is the Witness Protection Program. So I was doing witness protection investigations for defendants that were entering the Witness Protection Program. And that was pretty interesting, to be working with Russian mobsters, Latin
I have a few of those that went in there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And they rarely were successful, dude. Those guys, they just couldn't do it. There was so many restrictions on them that they eventually would just break protocol, and they would be kicked out of the program down the road. But at the time, for me, it was really cool to do these investigations on them and submit them to the court, and had to keep everything locked up in a special safe in my office, and I had to go through an additional FBI background investigation for a higher level security clearance, which I did. But then I went into supervision in Texas, and I was working then at that point primarily with drug mules, people that have been a lot of border cases, guys coming across the checkpoints with 18-wheelers, a lot of meth, a lot of cocaine, a lot of weed, coming across the border, getting caught. That ended up as a federal case. So my bread and butter for that caseload was a lot of guys that were, drug mules that were just getting caught, as well as good sprinkling of people that were addicted. But it wasn't until 2006, that's when I transferred back to the East Coast. And at that point, my marriage was just crapping the bed at that point.
Well, let me ask you something. Do you think the job had anything to do with the breakup?
That's a great question. No, not at all. It was just the wrong person to be with.
Well, thanks for being honest.
No. And I'm honored to that myself. No, it was just the wrong person, man.
I got you.
And we have 2 beautiful daughters. So I'll just quickly. So I have 4 daughters. I got a 27-year-old. I think she's 27, 28 now. God, she's gonna kill me. And then I got a 22-year-old, and now I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old.
Wow.
So my second wife, who I actually love, is my biggest fan. She's so supportive of me. She's a academic interventionist. We live in Connecticut. This is where we're from, now. We live in right outside of Hartford, West Hartford area.
Fancy.
Yeah, what's that?
I said fancy.
No, it is. Oh, yeah, it's beautiful here. Yeah, we're actually lucky. And but her commute's actually up in Springfield, Mass. But she loves working in the inner city. She loves working with the kids. But she's my biggest fan, and so we have a beautiful life here. We work very hard at it, But
yeah.
I met her during a period of my life that was actually not one of my best chapters. I was suffering from post-traumatic stress. I was supervising. So 2006, transfer back to the East Coast. My marriage is now almost done. I move out. I move into my house, and struggling to balance that with my daughters, who were much younger at the time, and they were living in Rhode Island. So having to there was a lot of parental alienation she was doing against me and the kids, but that's another story. But got through it. But at the time, interesting enough, was in my darkest hours when a promotion opportunity arrived, and it was for what they called the sex offender specialist. So for the federal government, and it was a brand new position. So at the time, about 2006, as you know, the internet was sort of coming up, and everyone's now moving online, and all the websites were now being created up, and and then we're having to start to see the smartphones, Blackberries stuff start to come out, and they started to see, the federal government, the U.S. Attorney's Office started to see a new class of offender, and those were sex offenders. Those were men downloading, producing, and sharing child pornography, and they didn't know what to do with them. So these guys were getting arrested. They were now entering the federal system, getting sentenced, and now they were starting to come out, and they needed people that were specialists in supervising this very difficult population. Nobody knew what to do with them, so they created this position here in Connecticut. I was working for the U.S. District Court. So for those who don't know, federal probation offices are siloed. They're very separate. Okay, so you get hired in the district or the federal court, like New York is the second circuit, right? So you get hired in the Second Circuit, which is New York State, Mass. What else? It's been a while. Puerto Rico, and you pretty much start and end your career in that jurisdiction for the federal government, right? So you're hired as a federal PO, you work for those federal judges there, you can apply to transfer somewhere else to another district, which is what I did. But generally speaking, you're expected to stay where you're hired. And so at the time, there was nobody to supervise these guys. And so they just created this position called sex offender, senior probation officer, sex offender specialist. I applied, not thinking I was going to get it. I only been on the job now for 5 years. So I was like, 7 years, not thinking I was going to get it. And what do you know? I actually got the position. It was on a Christmas day. Chief called me and she goes, "Hi, Paul, would you be interested in getting this position?" I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I would love this position. It was great. You got it. Start on Monday. So I got the promotion, nice pay raise, a lot more responsibility. And I'm walking around with this big inflated ego. Turned out nobody applied for it. Person that applied for that particular senior position. Nobody wanted it. Nobody wanted it.
We think about how, I'll say you're the trailblazer, because we think about all the investigations and it had to start somewhere and morph. So, thank you for doing that, because if not for you answering the call, and now so many others that want to put a stop to not only that, but the trafficking now, and what John was talking about, the fentanyl, and in the beginning of the show, it would still be kind of things swept under the rug, so to speak. So we got to take our next break. We will come back and talk more about your fascinating background. Stay tuned, everybody.
Look, when you need to respond to an aggressive situation to protect yourself, your family, or your property, understanding your firearm and legal position are critical. Officers know your skills are only as good as your commitment to training. So know what you're doing. So when you're in a vulnerable situation, we can count on your response. Whether you're a beginner or a licensed gun carrier, Carry in Texas offers basic firearms training, Texas permitless carry courses, license to carry, and basic 2A courses so you can understand the responsibilities, situational awareness, and learn the technical skill required when you carry your firearm. Go to carryintexas.com to find the right course for you. Join me, former United States Secret Service agent Samantha Horwitz, on the range for beginner basics, LTC prep, and range practice. Go to carryintexas.com today. That's carryintexas.com.
Hey, welcome back to a Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam and Paul Collette, retired federal probation officer. You have a spanning career over a few decades that is just something that not many people, when we see people going into the NYPD or into the fire department or into EMS, right? We notice those traumas from shootings, or you are seeing something that on a daily basis that really impacts the mental health. Before we left, we were talking about sex offenders, and you talk to anybody else and you talk about or sex trafficking, it angers you so much. And as a federal probation officer, your hands are tied. As much as you want to be a man and just beat the crap out of this guy for exploiting this child, you have to follow within the guidelines. That puts a pressure that nobody else knows on your mental stress, just everything about it. You feel the system's broken. You feel like this guy should be doing life in prison. On a daily basis, that is something so incredibly hard to do.
Evidence you have to look at. What you have to look at is just
I can't imagine. I can't imagine what you go through for the remainder of your career.
Yeah, it was. And thank you for saying that. Yeah, because it for me, having been exposed to that, so they promoted me, and here I am having to bootstrap this brand new program that nobody, number one, wanted to do. Number two, nobody knew what to do. I was the only one on the East Coast for the United States government supervising these individuals. So I had to learn, all right, what do I need to start looking out for? I know about the offenses, I know what they're doing, but I need to speak to the actual case agents that are doing this stuff, that are investigating this. So I was working in New Haven, right next door to the federal courthouse is the FBI building, which has got like 300 agents there, and beautiful building. So I walked over, introduced myself, and I met one of their senior agents who was doing this kind of work. And he brought me into his computer lab, and he said, "Listen, I'm going to show you some stuff, and this is what we do. All right." He says, "You're going to start seeing this stuff out in the field when you're supervising these guys." I'm like, "All right, go for it." Brings up his computer, and now he's showing me child pornography in high definition with sound, and these are children that are being sexually assaulted right there. And I remember at the time, like you said, John, I wanted to beat the crap out of these guys, and I'm getting angry, and he's looking at me. And he reaches over, puts his hand on my shoulder, and he goes, "Paul, listen, this has already occurred. That girl is safe. We saved her. Okay? I know you're angry. I know you want to do something, but what you're looking at is over. A lot of these are victims. We found them. They're saved." Okay? Once he put that in perspective, I could then start to dissociate myself from the emotional quotient, of that. And then I went to work. I did the work for almost 8 years. I'd go out into the field. I'd start to think like these guys, if I was doing this, where would I put my pornography, my child pornography searches? We'd start to find stuff. I'd find young victims, unfortunately, the victims that
And
are
you
hurt
had
on
young
my
daughters,
watch.
and you had young daughters at the time, correct?
Young daughters, and it changes you, right? So I'll give you an
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
So I'm taking my daughters to Chuck E. Cheese, right? And this was like 2008, 2009. And I'm hanging out with them at Chuck E. Cheese, and I see some guy walking past them and alone. And I'm looking like, that's a sex offender. That he's going to prey on the. It was just some father chasing after his kid, right? Or I'd taken my kids to the playground, and and I'm seeing some old dude sitting in front of the chair as little girls are going down, and I'm thinking he's looking up their skirts, and I'd follow him to his car and write down his plate and run it. It's just some grandpa, he's with his kids, but it changes you. It really makes you have this different perspective on on what's safe
Society.
and not safe. And I'll never have a male babysitter in my house. I've seen how that goes south. And it's not, as you guys know, it's not the stranger, right? It's the people that you let in willingly. It's
Right.
Uncle Rick, who's really good with balloon animals at the party. That's the one you got to watch out for. It's the priest, it's the teacher, it's access equals opportunity with that population. And I really, really started to kind of hone in on that and get really good at it. The problem is that I didn't have the coping skills. Okay. So I thought, I'm developing PTSD. I need to throw myself even more into work, right? So my marriage is gone, and I'm alone. I'm single guy doing what single guys do, having a great time, drinking a little bit too much, having to partying, working a lot of hours, doing a really good job at it. But what's happening is, what if the work at the time is toxic, right? And what you're doing overtime is slowly killing you. And I didn't have the resilience to kind of recognize that until finally around 2013, after I met my second wife. And, we're now engaged, and, we're very serious about what we're doing. I really had to take a step back, and I said to myself, I can't do this forever. I just can't work with these guys forever. So I went to my chief, went to my deputy chief, supervisors, and I asked for help, and they did not help me. They were like, you can either step down from that position, or you got to stay in it. And I was like, you can't offer me another senior position with gang members or mental health. Why am I doing sex offenders for 8 years right now? You know what that's doing to me? I mean, the FBI, their behavior analysis unit, the ones that do serial killers, it's like 3 years.
Yeah.
Cycle them out of there. Right? And they offer mental health support and all these wonderful things. And for me, it was nothing. They left me out to dry. And I had a choice. I could get more and more bitter, or I could take control of what I needed to do with my life. Because, the harder you bang that stake into the ground, the more difficult it's going to be to pull it out. And I was getting to that point where, am I going to reach some magical number of 20 thinking that my life is going to get better, that I'm going to sit on the beach drinking out of a coconut, and everything's going to be fine. But no, your trauma is going to follow you right there to the beach, and it's going to sit down right next to you, and it's not going to get better, and it's going to get worse. So I sat down with my wife, and I told her, I said, listen, I've been thinking about this lately. I've been thinking about stepping down, going back down to the line, taking a pay cut, but I want to go back to graduate school. I want to go to graduate school, and I want to do what I wanted to do, was to help people originally. That's why I got into this field. Not to play cop, not to play special agent, was to actually genuinely help people. But somewhere along the way, I got sidetracked, and then realizing that, I'm about to have another family, and I like working. I have a lifestyle like we all do, right?
Right.
And I didn't want to live off half of my pension or even less. I was just like, what else is there for me? So I said, I want to become a clinician. I want to go back to school. I asked her, because you met me. I told her, you met me when I was a federal probation officer. How cool is that, babe? But are you going to stay? Are you willing to stay with me through this new version of myself? And she was in 100%. She was like, absolutely.
That's a support network a lot of people don't have.
A lot of people. And by the way, John and Sam, I didn't tell anybody at work. I didn't tell anybody that I was going back to graduate school. I kept that to myself because I work with some pretty toxic, individuals. As they say, I was a fan of the circus, not the clowns. I actually enjoyed working with many of my offenders. There are some pretty cool guys out there, because you know who they are, and they owe to who they are. But
right,
some of the people I work with just toxic, especially the managers. They were just horrible people.
Well, back in 2013, mental health, or even going a little bit prior, we were still under the suck it up, kind of boss's attitude. Those are old school bosses that were, really let's go out and drink off the stress. and which now that we know, as we've learned and became educated, that is the wrong way to do it. And thank God you had the mindset to be able to make that change, because a lot of people don't have that mindset. They fall into that rut, and we've seen the devastating actions and the after effects of it.
And I also want to say that, you reconnected with your why, your original why, and you did help and, save people and identify victims, in your career. So there was that, but you truly went and identified with your why. When we come back from the break, we're going to hear how schooling went and what you're doing right now to really help first responders, not only through your story, understand, hey, don't get lost. But if you do, it's okay. And the things that you do to help them. Stay tuned, everybody. We'll be right back.
Leftovers again? It's time for something we haven't had in a long time. It's time for something right. It's time to make the right choice. OBBM Network TV is always the right choice. Choose right.
Hey, welcome back to A Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam and Paul Collette. Interesting back history, but all your experience, all those traumas and things that you did put you in a good place and gave you the networking tools and the mental health tools to really go forward and help patients in what you really wanted to do in life to begin with. So share with us, we went through that transition with all the probation and the sex offenders and the trafficking, and then you get to graduate school, and now you are out there helping people mentally, opposed to, putting cuffs on people.
Yeah. That's something that I always knew I wanted to do. I always wanted to be, much like you, helping people and also have that entrepreneurial spirit as well. Mm-hmm. And I always wanted to try that and taste that. And having my own private practice was something that I always wanted to try, but I was a little too scared at the time. So I went to graduate school, grinded away for all those hours, got a lot of time in that. Took me about 4 or 5 years to do. Finally get licensed. And at that point, COVID hit. Mm-hmm. So it was 2019, and I was just newly licensed with the state of Connecticut as a licensed alcohol and drug counselor. So it's a very niche-oriented master's level clinician. So we work only with people with substance use disorders and co-occurring disorders. So people with PTSD, anxiety, depression, so somebody uses heroin is also suffering from depression, for instance, right? So we're licensed to treat both at the same time, but I'm very niche. Just like if you go to law school, you specialize, or med school, you specialize. I specialize only with this population. So opened up my practice while I was still a Fed, and then COVID hit and everything shut down. And at that point, I had almost 24 years in. I was done. It was time to pull the pin and just get out. Gave him 2 weeks notice because that's all he deserved. And I just got out, and there was no party, no nothing for me. Happily
retired. Your box of stuff, clean out your desk.
Oh yeah, they couldn't wait to get me out of there. So but I had some good people towards the end there. I had some good supervisors and few coworkers left. They were actually pretty nice to me, and I'm still in touch with today. But for the most part, I was just happy to go, and it was time. So I leave, and coincidentally, a position opened up at the state of Connecticut in the Department of Corrections as a addiction counselor. So I actually applied just for shits and grins, and I got hired, and I actually went through another academy in my early 50s. I went through the Connecticut State Correction Academy. I was one of the oldest guys in there, and I went through a correction academy at my age, and I had a great time. It was a blast because everyone who's hired in that agency, they have to go through an academy, because you're not just a CO. You're also, even if you're in treatment, you're expected to pitch in to help the other COs. If there's a riot, if there's somebody that needs to be, taken care of, you have to step in as well. So I had to do that to get the job, and I actually enjoyed it. I had a great time, but I did that for about 1.5 years, and I realized, I was on the fast track, I think, to become a deputy warden. I was actually looking to get promoted quickly there because of my education and my background, but I realized, I'm just doing the same thing as I did when I was a probation officer. It's not really that different. Yeah. What am I doing? So state opened up again, and another position opened up as a professor at one of the colleges as a drug and alcohol professor training people to become the next generation of counselors. And I applied and I got hired by them. And so now I've been there for almost 4 years. I'm an associate professor at one of the colleges full time. And I also have my private practice as well, full time. And I'm only work with men in my private practice. I'm culturally competent. I only work with men that are in law enforcement, first responders, military, as well as people that are on probation and parole. I don't work with sex offenders anymore because they call it private practice, but I help people that are transitioning in this new phase of their life. And I love it. I absolutely love it. And because, there are very few men these days in the mental health space that are counselors. 30 years ago, yeah, it was mostly men. Today, 85% of clinicians are women, which is great. But the problem is now, as you said, John, as more and more men today are becoming more in touch with, recognizing the symptoms of PTSD and they need help, they're looking for other men to go to for counseling, and they're not finding them. It's mostly women. And so they're, as a unicorn, they're coming to me for help. And my practice is full. I love helping these guys. And I'm also helping them, develop hopefully the right coping skills as well.
Well, it is a comfort factor for a male to talk to a male. It is because you relate a little bit better. Some of the guys who go to female counselors, and I've had 2 of them already that I've gone to, it is a little, and I don't want to say the word intimidating, but a little maybe embarrassing sometimes to bring up certain aspects or certain things. And you're like, as confidential as it is, you still don't feel that confident. As a male to male bonding, it is a lot more comfortable, 100%.
Yeah,
I don't know if that would be on like Sam. Would you feel the same, like talking to a male as you would? Who would you feel more comfortable with?
I mean, I think it's different depending on why you're reaching out to the person. I mean, you're asking somebody who worked in a male-dominated, workforce her whole life. So I don't have a problem, talking with guys about anything. But I can definitely understand, depending on the situation of why you're reaching out, that you guys just have a different way of forming a bond that doesn't happen the same way, woman to guy. So I applaud you. That is so fantastic, because it's exactly what you said. You scroll through anything and it's all ladies. No offense, ladies. But there's a time and a place. Obviously, if it's an exigent circumstance or emergency, you want to get the person treated as fast as possible to kind of get the situation manageable, and then go from there. But Paul, when we come back after this, our last break here, we want to hear throughout your career, there were points where you needed to transition, where your headspace needed to go to the next phase, and how you did that successfully. So we'll talk about that when we come back. Stay tuned, everybody.
Rise and vibe with your new elevated morning ritual. Meet Rise by Frequency. Frequency charged nutrition. Rise is formulated with a blend of 7 different organic mushrooms, B vitamins, amino acids, and green coffee bean extract. Rise supports brain health, performance, and focus while enhancing mood, mental clarity, and energy. Enjoy the delicious mango lemonade flavor while giving your mind the nutrients it needs. Get charged up with Rise. Fuel your body and mind today.
All right, we are rising and vibing with John and Sam. You hear about it every week. Rise is what we call a nootropic, and nootropics are believed to support healthy cognitive function, mental clarity, and overall brain health. I use Rise every morning along with Source, which are minerals that everybody needs. I mix it together. I use it as a pre-workout. I am in the zone. And yes, there's sound effects that come with it. No, I'm just kidding. But it gets me in the zone. The best part, it tastes great. There's no sugar, so it's completely keto friendly. It is for mental performance, brain health, energy, mental clarity, creativity, motivation, concentration, alertness, and mood. And it takes you through your entire day. Use 1 packet, use 2, whatever it is. No jitters, no, you don't get this like caffeine high and then it drops you.
So there's no crash.
Right. No crash, sustained all day. Right now, if you go to a badge of honor health.com, I just realized the banner's gone there, but a badge of honor health.com. We've packaged Rise and Source together, so you can subscribe and save there, or just get the Rise that I just talked about. Again, a badge of honor health.com, and go there after the show and order it up, and you can rise and vibe with me and John. Now back to the show.
All right. Well, rise and shine, or rise. I'm going to try that, Sam, because it's better than drinking a couple of cups of coffee every morning to get that in. So I am going to order mine probably this week as well.
You'll love it. You'll love
I'm
it.
looking forward to
Especially
it.
with the dispatch work that you do. But before our last break, Paul, we were talking about the specific mindset shifts that you needed to do throughout your career. What are some of those that you would recommend to folks? And while you're talking, I'm going to put up your website.
Yeah, so I would recommend, what worked for me is watch other people up the line that are getting close to retirement. So if you're already in the field and you have this date that you're going to retire, okay, or leave, just watch what other people are doing. Law enforcement, unfortunately, has a lot of soft skills that don't translate that well into the private sector. And most people, when they retire, end up having to go back to work. It could be part-time or full-time, but most do. And they either supplement their income or they're looking for something to replace that loss of income. And one thing that I did was I had to audit what kind of skills, where do I want to be X number of years from now? So invest in yourself. If you're not investing in yourself, and taking advantage of it now, there is time down the road. Okay. But I would recommend that, figure out what you want to do. You have time. I did it. I went back to school in my mid to late 40s to do what I did. And, your story is yours to write. Your job or your career, it may have a chapter in it. Okay. But that chapter doesn't get to define the ending of how your life is going to unfold. You have the power to shape your own future. Okay. And it's okay to focus on building a life of happiness and positivity and surrounding yourself with positive individuals, and those are the connections that are going to nurture and support you down the road, because you have a choice. You can suffer or not suffer, right? Pain is inevitable. Suffering is a choice. I chose, in spite of everything that I went through, okay, from crappy managers to working with a horrific population, I felt trapped. And then it wasn't until later on that I realized, what? I have choices. And, this agency doesn't get to define those choices. I get to define my choices. And that's why when I did what I did, everything unfolded. I wasn't a salmon swimming upstream anymore. I was Paul, the future clinician. And I was starting to surround myself with people who were doing that kind of work. Right. And so, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Correct. So surround yourself with 3 or 4 or 5 people that are slightly smarter than you, that are where you want to be. NYPD, they called it having a hook, right? Or a rabbi, and, having somebody that'll pull you up to that level. That's what you need to do in this field. Find your mentors out there, and whether or not they're in this field or outside the field, start to implement those practices. Because if you don't, listen, what got you here may not get you there.
Right.
Okay. This is just a chapter. You got into law enforcement or a first responder or military. And I was in the military for 8 years. I was in the Navy Reserve, and I loved it, and I chose to go full. I decided I didn't want to, but it was part of me, and I put that on my resume, and now I know a lot about working with, plus I grew up in that with, being a culturally competent clinician. And when people come to me, they know what they're getting. And so that's the service that I provide. That's the niche that I've formed for my career, and the rewards are there for you. I'm making more money than I ever made when I was working for the feds. And I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying because I want that for all of us. I want that for everybody here. You could do 20, 25 years or even longer or shorter, depending on how your career ends. There were times I came into work, I wasn't sure if I'd have a job at the end of the day. I've been reprimanded. I've been written up. Okay. And I realized that I need to take control here. I need to start doing something that I feel for me that's going to put me on the right path. And one way to do that was, why did I do this to begin with? And that was to help people. And once I did that,
See, you took control, Paul. And what happens with a lot of first responders, and got a lot of guys who retire, go into the same field, they'll go into security right after, because they're used to being beat down. They feel that's all they know. And they kind of, feel like they're going to lose their identity if they, because for 20, 25 years, they were law enforcement, right? So they feel that going to security is going to be somewhat of law enforcement, but they have so much more potential that they don't even know how to tap into because they've been beaten down throughout those 20 years, 25 years.
Well, I think they let the job also shape them and become their identity instead of living their why through their job, like we talk about in our workshops. Paul, I've got your website up so people can connect. It's sapservicesct.com. For those of you listening on your favorite podcast app, that is SAP Services and CT for Connecticut.com. And you're right. If you go anywhere that we connected, Paul, where you play on social, people are going to know, the guys are going to know what they get. And so, thank you for just putting it all out there, because if you're in need of some guidance, some help, the last thing you want to be doing is like, well, is this guy really going to be able to help me? You should know by reading it, and you put it all out there. You do have the background, you do have the expertise. And I just got a question, the CT. Yes, Connecticut, sapservicesct.com. There's a contact through there. I know you also play on LinkedIn. Anywhere else on social?
I have a Facebook page. That's mostly for family, though. But LinkedIn and Facebook, not Facebook. My practice website is where you can reach out to me.
Awesome. And
any questions? Also, they can contact me and I will respond. LinkedIn, I'm huge, on there, and I love. My LinkedIn profile is unlocked, so I don't lock down my profile. So people are certainly welcome, to create a LinkedIn account and just take a peek on there, and they can see me and DM me through my website as well. If you just need some mentorship or just to talk to somebody, it's free. I'm not charging you for it.
And you can also get in touch with Paul if you want to have him come speak, because I saw you just did a speaking event as well. So a wealth of knowledge and experience. Paul, thank you so much for coming on tonight. Fascinating background. And thank you, to you for your service, for your family's service, and always remembering to pay it forward and just making this world a better place for everybody. So thank you so much.
Paul, thank you very much, man. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, team. I really appreciate you, what you do for our community. Thank you.
Absolutely. And we will be in touch. Have a good one.
Take care, brother.
All right. It is really cool that people watching and listening tonight got an understanding of of a different federal service, right? Yeah. And how that really shaped Paul because of the people that he was supervising and what the effect was, and then getting into sex offenders, and then at the higher level with WITSEC. I felt like, he could be a consultant on like the TV shows or the movies because, with the WITSEC especially, you're getting the nomenclature right. So that was like kind of cool, because they don't always get it right. So, right. If you need somebody for your film or TV show, Paul Collette right there. He can help you out there. There is so much. It is November. I feel like this month is the month to be grateful and thankful for everything that we have. We are grateful for everybody that tunes in, that watches, that comments. All of you out there, thank you so much for the support and love that you show to us. It's also a season of giving. We know we have the holidays coming up, but if you directly want to support your first responders out there, you can visit our website at badgeofhonor.org. There's a little blue donate button for all of you that have donated, that have just made the decision to make any amount it all goes back to our first responders to provide scholarships so they can get into the wellness and resiliency programs and workshops that we do. We also do amazing events with other folks and organizations out there. So thank you, abadgeofhonor.org. Click that donate button. It's also where you can find out what we're doing. And next month at the Garland Police Department, who's a partner of ours, they've got the Wellness and Recovery Day on Wednesday, December 11th. Also on the 11th, I'll be wrapping up Carry the Loads 100,000 meter challenge. I am well into it. I got something like 62,000 meters still to go.
That's a lot.
We are
That's
moving,
a lot.
Yeah. Well, it's strategy.
Yeah.
But moving every day to honor those men and women that serve our countries, that paid the ultimate sacrifice, those that serve currently. Thank you. So we're moving, challenging ourselves, and also saying thank you at the same time. Again, thank you to OBBM. If you're watching us on the TV channel, obbmnetwork.tv, look for the replays. You can watch anytime we're live on the Dallas channel tonight, but you can go in and watch anytime all of the episodes. So to all of our first responders out there, thank you so much for what you do. You have got a group of prayer warriors out there holding you close, making sure that you get home safe to your families every night. Thank you for keeping our communities safe. To all of our veterans, thank you for fighting the good fight that allows John and I to do a show like this every single week, to speak our minds. And also to our active duty personnel, they are all over the globe now. They are still getting detailed to every corner of the world. We are holding a safe space for you as well. Thank you for keeping our shores safe. And God bless you. We know you're going to be missing the holidays with your family. So know that we're thinking about you as well. John, take us home.
Well, you said it the best. I just want to thank Paul once again for everything that he's done. I want to thank all our first responders. And just remember, do not forget your why. There is hope at the end of the tunnel. And if the job's not for you, man, get out and do something that you love to do, because you only get one of these lives, man, and you want to use it to the best of your ability. And till next week, man, peace.
See you next week, everybody.
A Badge of Honor podcast is produced for the OBBM Network podcast and protected under copyright law. For content permissions, please submit your request to abadgeofhonor.com on the content page. For OBBM Network programming information, please call 214-714-0495 today.